Welcome back to Call of the Father. This week, or in the past week, I went camping with my kids. So sorry that I didn't get one out on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. Like I usually try to get it out on Tuesday morning, but it just is what it is. I'm not making any money doing this. I'm just doing this because it's on my heart. It's something I wanted to do, and I feel like I just hope there's someone out there that I'm touching. And I do see some stats. I'm able to see some things on downloads, and I'm able to see that there are certain cities that obscure towns that I'm sure it's the same people listening, and I just really appreciate you listening. I just hope more than my appreciation, I just hope that it's touching you and helping you, and that's why I'm doing it. So I appreciate the ones that are following. It gives me a little motivation to keep going and keep doing this in hopes that it's really touching you and helping you. So this week I kind of had a break. I think I mentioned my job ended, which was a planned thing. So I was laid off the end of a contract, and a lot of things have worked out really well. So I've had 2.5 weeks off, start my new job this next Monday, and I'm excited but nervous. And there's things, in my healing path. I don't know. There's been a lot of healing where I've learned to manage emotions and manage things, but I can't lie. I've felt a little bit of anxiety over this, and just figuring out how, okay, this is a big thing, and how do I isolate this and know that it's not who I am, and it's not this little bit of anxiety doesn't define me, and how do I move into a safer place emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It's not a hard thing to do when you have the tools, and just resting on the fact that my security isn't in knowing everything what will happen. My security isn't in being in control of things. That's where this anxiety comes from, is wanting to have control or see that everything is sure and I know exactly how everything will play out, and I don't. So it's all good. We're looking at a move. We're looking at I, I I have a little leeway starting my job and kind of see how things go and decide where we're going to move to exactly, and figuring out what to do with my house, and we're going to probably just rent it. But anyway, some things are unsure, and I have a few weeks after I start to kind of make some decisions before I do something that I've said before. I said I'm never working nights again. And this job requires that I do some nights. And so that's part of the anxiety for me. I know that because you know, um, I've heard a lot. I know Lisa Romano said it a lot, but I've heard it other places too, I believe. But what you resist persists. And that's been a theme in my life. Often when I said, I will never do this again, that's where I find myself again. So trying to just embrace it and figure out how to move forward. Anyway, I believe that there's some things with this new job that'll just be really good. Some things about it just look like one of the best places to land that I've ever been. And so we'll just see. And I'm just trying to get in that heart space of knowing that I'm not in control, and that's okay. I believe God has, everything's always worked out well for me, and in the end, and some things have been hard, but God's always looked out for me. So I had this last week. We went camping, me and the three kids, and one of my daughter's friends went with us, and we went off grid. Basically, we were out of cell service for a week, and man, it was amazing. We paddle boarded, we fished, we camped, we saw moose, elk, we saw all kinds of critters. It was just a really good time, and good kind of wind down, and timing was so good of things. So now I'm back. I'm ready to put this episode out, and a lot of talk has happened with my daughter this week where we just talked about she felt like in the last episode when I interviewed her, there were things left unsaid, things she wanted to dive into a little more. And so she's here with me, Sweetie Pie. Do you care if I say your name?
No, it's fine.
That's Riley, my my older of the younger three, Riley. And I started this thing anonymous, and I'm kind of gotten to a point where I don't know that it matters, but whatever. We'll just see what happens. But Riley's okay with me saying her name, and so she wants to talk about some more things about what it's like growing up with me as her dad, encouraging her to date, and what she sees with other kids. And I'm really proud of her. Like there's so many things where I've been on this healing journey, and I felt like when the divorce started, I realized what a hole I was in and what I had to dig myself out of, and that I was a freaking mess. And my kids never thought that they would ever have to go through that. And Riley talks a lot about growing up, that when she was younger, the security that she felt, and then and I remember the kids saying, talking about other families and seeing kids go through divorce, and even Riley having so much compassion for other kids and saying that will never happen to us. And then when it happened, it was like, holy shit, here we are. And I'm a mess. And then I started to realize how damaged I was, and that I still was my inner child. I was a little kid who needed to be a parent. And I realized that I had a big hole to crawl out of, and I had to heal in order to create any kind of space for my kids to actually heal. So, in that, there's a lot of things with, we're on this subject of dating. Maybe we'll do, I don't know. But I kind of wanted to ask you about what it feels like seeing. I think you've seen some of the healing that I've done, and then some of the things you went through this year, and then dating in the middle of that. If we get into that, that it's been a struggle for you this year. I felt like it's really hard. I felt like you were on your own journey, and I wanted to be here for you, but there were things that it was yours, but I felt like my healing created space for you to finally do that.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like this year, like things started to feel like more emotional, like thinking back to that, feeling like I never really wanted to have to feel that pain or have to really think about that. But it felt like this year, and I kind of agree, I know we talked about it a little bit, but I feel like you've gotten a lot stronger this year, like healing wise and stuff. And I feel like I finally felt comfortable to be able to feel my feelings and knowing that it was okay. Because I think at the very beginning of the divorce, I felt like I wanted to be there for my two younger siblings and everybody, and so it felt like I was more worried about them than myself.
Yeah, which that kind of, I see that pattern, and you're the oldest. Well, it's like two sets of three kids, but where we say you're the oldest of the younger three, and there's that dynamic there, and you felt like you had to be that strong older sister. And some of this even goes at like, I've worried about you being the parentified
Mm-hmm.
child. I've been conscious of it, and there's been times where man, it's a hard hole to dig out of for where I was at, where I found myself, and try to heal so
Yeah.
that you can. And there's no denying there were times when you tried to play a parent, and I, I don't, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say besides I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry that you felt like you had to do that. And there were times when I did try to say, hey, Riley, I got this. I'm the parent.
Mm-hmm.
Let me take care of it. I got this. And I wanted you to be able to be a kid, but there was a lot of pressure on you, a lot of pressure that you felt.
I think it became like kind of hard because Maggie and Eddie felt like that our mom wasn't present anymore. But then it kind of got to be like where they knew they could kind of count on me for that. And then it got to be a thing where I had to learn how to start to set boundaries on that too.
Yeah, and it's hard when you would go to your mom's. I'm not in control of anything there.
Yeah.
So I know that you've mentioned that things were tough there sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where you felt like if you didn't look out for them or take care of them, nobody would.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like this year you did learn to start setting some boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and you did learn to start saying no. And there's always dynamics. I'm proud of all of you kids. Like, you've all grown so much. I've seen healing in all of you. But this year, it was like yours was kind of delayed about 3 to 4 years. And I saw all of a sudden you went through some really emotional times getting through that. Where do you feel like you're at now?
I feel like I'm definitely doing a lot better. I think at the beginning of the school year, like there was a lot of change, and I think that also made me realize how much my life had changed prior to that, and I just didn't want to think about it or realize because it would cause me like pain or hurt. And I think now, like, I think I still have hard days or things will feel sad sometimes or upsetting, but I think that overall, I think I've done a lot better and just focus on more myself, and it's helped. I have one mentor at my school, and she's really good to talk to about this kind of stuff, and she helps me just kind of get a different outlook on some things sometimes. And she was saying how it's so important for me to start doing things for me and not other people all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think once I started doing that and just taking time for myself and doing things that I want to do, I think I started to do better and feeling like I was being cared for by myself too. And I think that made a huge difference in a lot of things, especially like the emotional aspect, feeling like I was actually able to show up for me when I like didn't before.
Yeah. I've seen that, and I've tried to understand what you're doing, and just be open to you having time to yourself and space to do that when you needed it. It's hard for me coming from the codependent programming
Yeah.
that I have. Sometimes it's hard for me when I see you pulling back a little bit or kind of quiet, and I'm like, is she okay? And so then I'm like, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of that old
Yeah.
codependent programming. And I was worried that some of the things that I saw in you were like carrying on the cycle of codependency.
Yeah.
I felt like you were on track to become codependent. And then in some ways, I see you breaking the cycle for yourself, and like maybe ahead of me at times in that. And I've seen that a lot in this whole journey where, I have to do it or the cycles won't be broken. But then as I'm doing it, then I look at you kids and I'm like, holy crap, in some ways I see them ahead of me in this whole thing. And I don't know how that's working. And it's almost like confirmation of what what we do, what we choose just continues and manifests in our life. And even I don't even know how to put it in words, but what I start to create in my life, then I look at my life and it that creation is ahead of where I'm at. And I see
Yeah.
part of that creation is you guys healing. Even you particularly, Riley.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like especially seeing like you start to grow and stuff, I think it was really hard for us kids at first knowing that you were like hurting and going through. I think that everybody was obviously. But then I think that once we realized that you have it and that you're gonna handle it, you know what I mean? And for us too, when you would talk to us about that you want to like heal for yourself so that you can be here for us when we needed it. And I think that was such an important thing for us kids to be able to witness and see too. Especially if we like there's going to be times in our lives where we're going to have to heal from other things too. Like, you know what I mean? That's part of life. And I think being able to especially see your own parent grow and heal in front of you makes a huge difference on that, and is in a way an outline just showing you like, yeah, it's possible and you can do this, and it's hard, and just kind of what it looks like it's kind of a raw thing and a pretty thing at the same time.
Yeah, it's hard, no doubt. And I can't say that all my philosophies are right. And I want to mention real quick that somebody very close to me mentioned on the last episode, I made some statements about the experts say this, and I disagree, and I got to be careful what I say. Like, there are people with credentials. Maybe I should be more specific, because there's one quote unquote expert that I heard that claims herself an expert and does have degrees and credentials, but there's also an aspect of religion that she plays into, and sometimes you can have credentials but go very hard one way because of a bias still, and you might sidestep those credentials. And I think what this person that's close to me mentioned and pointed out was that, I don't listen to everybody and I can't hit up every single resource, but what this person said was that actually many of the experts would very much agree with me. What from her experience, many of the experts would agree with the things that I'm saying. I come to these conclusions kind of out of intuition and healing, and I didn't necessarily I've said this once before very briefly, but in my healing journey, the thing that's amazing to me, and I need this kind of confirmation and proof, it's I'm very much a rebel at heart, and if you tell me this is the system, I'm going to be bound and determined. I don't know why I'm wired this way, and I kind of embrace it in some ways, but I'm going to be bound and determined to find a better way. I don't, I just like, fuck that. If you tell me this is the only way, I'm going to look for the flaws in it, and I'm going to look for a better way to do it. It's probably, I don't know, it's a pro and a con, and it could be a weakness. But anyway, often what's happened in my healing journey is I've come to conclusions that of things, or I've experienced things, like I've mentioned the experiencing meeting, get emotional over this, but meeting my inner child the first time was coming home that day, and I never knew that that was a thing that they talk about in healing circles about your inner child. I thought there was a cute thing they talk about, like I'm still a child inside, but I didn't realize that where it has to do with parts work too, I think, and IFS, interfamily systems, and parts work, where I believe where places where we're traumatized or wounded, parts of us are stunted there. So I needed to meet that inner child, and there was a day coming home from work and I met my inner child. I realized it was like I started envisioning him and realizing that he was there, and that was a huge moment in my life. And then later I found out, somebody's like, holy crap, like that's what they say. That's what they say. They talk about your inner child and healing that inner child. And I was like, wow, really? And so a lot of my healing journey has been that way, where I need to see the confirmation after I come to conclusions, and then people talk about it. So what this person close to me said was, actually a lot of experts would agree with, absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I'm not going to bring up the name to out this person. She has a lot of followers, way more than I have, and but it's kind of sad. I feel like she might be leading some people astray. And we mentioned her by name, and she goes, "Yeah, she's going into her religion and getting very one-sided based on religious bias, that some of those things aren't true." So I should be careful about saying experts. There are a lot of experts, and I've benefited from a lot of experts, like Lisa Romano, and she may not have all of the degrees, but man, has she done more work than people with degrees to actually corner all of the truths that she needed to heal and to help others heal. She really found those truths and isolated them, and it's helped me. And there's others. I keep finding others that a lot of just, I don't believe in one source to heal. I don't want to be worshiped that way ever. If this thing blows up, I just want to help people, and I want to be a piece of their puzzle. And for me, Lisa Romano was like a huge piece that set in motion finding more pieces that fit in my puzzle. And I keep finding more resources and people that it all fits together like a puzzle. So I just want to be a piece of that puzzle. And I don't believe in one person being the whole puzzle for anybody. If that's the case, I feel like something could be wrong there, and you got to be real careful. Anyway, I've just seen with my kids and with you, Riley, so many times where I'm trying to heal, and I see you end up ahead of me, and even learning the same things that I'm healing, and some of them often I didn't mention to you. And then we start talking and you tell me things, and I'm like just blown away by what you're learning is where I'm at, and even maybe ahead of where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so spiritual and scientific.
Yeah.
I believe in these laws of manifestation, laws of quantum physics that are involved in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So where do you feel like you're at now in your healing journey? Do you feel like you're getting control of your emotions? And
Yeah, I think I've done a lot better, and I think I've done better starting to utilize people in my life to help me through things when I'm having a hard time. Because I think before I felt like I was being like a burden to people, and especially trying to reach out to kids my age, which was a struggle, a really hard struggle for a while there, feeling like none of them can relate, and which I never felt upset or mad about that because they just don't have the same situation, obviously, but it got to feel just like alone in a lot of ways, and like nobody really understood where I was coming from. And it's hard with some kids feeling like they didn't want to have to understand, which makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're all still kids. But,
yeah.
and so I think that was a really hard thing for me for a while, like several years, just feeling like I couldn't find anybody who could relate or understand or even
Mm-hmm.
want to put themselves in my shoes, you know?
Sure.
And I think once I found several people in my life that could try to understand, or I actually have a friend that can relate in several ways, and I found that to be super helpful, and just, I don't know, it helps to talk about things like healing wise and stuff and where you're at right now.
Sure.
And just be able to understand somebody else too who's coming from a similar situation, and that it's not just you, that you're not like alone in that. And so I think that's probably been one of the biggest things on where I'm at right now, has been able to talk to people around me about that kind of stuff and everything that's happened, and them understand where I'm coming from and just feel like heard, I guess, in that, and
Mm-hmm.
understood. And also being able to understand them and where they're coming from too.
Mm-hmm. So, it's really hard to think about. I feel like you have some gifts, and I've seen them since you were a little tiny girl. I remember. I feel like these these hard things that we've gone through and you've gone through and your healing will help your gift, but man, there's just a balance there. You have a gift for empathy and connection, and I think that some of what you've gone through will help you know where to apply that and where to set boundaries, because there are people who will definitely take advantage
Yeah.
if you don't learn some of these lessons, man, it really sucks as a parent watching you hurt and go through some of these lessons and learn some of the things, but it's your journey and feel like it'll serve you, and you have learned to process a lot of these things so that I feel like you're on the right path. When you were little tiny, I remember you coming home from preschool and talking about this friend that you made in preschool, and she was so pretty and so sweet, and like you just adored this girl, and you kept talking about her, and we're like, I just remember thinking, man, like this is crazy how much she's enamored by this girl, and I just it was very interesting, and it definitely caught my attention. And then when we went to your school for something, and I got to see who the girl was, and she was very high special needs. Like, I don't know if she could even talk, and I don't remember if she had Downs or
I don't remember either.
what the situation was, but she's very high special needs, and it just melted my heart that that's who you just attached to and saw so much love and good in, like you only saw good, and you just wanted to show love, and it was one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my life. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do a little bit. I remember, it's kind of weird. I started thinking about it the other day too, like going back to my first year of preschool and everything. And I remember some other kids not understanding any of that. And I remember this one girl, like, she got some drawings from like her classmate and stuff. And I was one who gave her a drawing. And I remember I was up late like the night before, and I was just like drawing all these drawings for everybody in my class. Like, I wanted to go give him like all these drawings. And this one girl, I gave it to her, and I don't know what she was going through at the time, but it makes me wonder. And she looked at me and she said, "It's ugly and I don't want it." And that hurt my feelings
Aww.
so bad. And so I just remember there being a lot of like, I don't know, everybody in my preschool, like, it's weird to think about now, but I just wonder like what everybody was going through, like especially that girl in particular, you know. And it's just sad to think that not everybody can show love to each other like that because of what they're going through in different times in their life, you know. And some people aren't capable of that, being like where they're raised and stuff, you know what I mean, yet. Like, I think that's a really hard dynamic to comprehend.
Sure. Showing love's a hard thing, and we all, man, I guess I can't say that I grew up learning
Yeah.
how to show love. I knew something was missing, and even, a point I wanted to come to and just see what your thoughts are on it now. And it has to do with seeking to heal and be able to reach that point of love. And I think, I don't know if you've listened to the episode where I talked about the day that I realized that I was no longer bitter with your mom and the guy that she left with, and that and just for the audience, so like what happened was I didn't try to point it out. I don't know. We'll see what Riley says, but from the beginning of the divorce and the affair, Riley and her siblings saw everything. I didn't have to, it wasn't a secret thing. It was pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not talking about something trying to point out where I was right and her mom was wrong, because I think I've been very transparent with the kids, even coming to a point where I take accountability for where I was wrong. It takes two to tango, and a lot of my programming made it very hard for your mom to love me. Mm-hmm. It was hard for her to love that unhealed version of me, and I think I've said that to you.
Yeah. As
I've healed. But from the beginning, trying to navigate all of that, when I had these hard feelings, from the beginning, I've even shared with you my mission statement. I don't want to be bitter. Part of it was I don't want to be bitter, but I was.
Right.
but how do I navigate this when I'm bitter and I'm trying to help you kids be in a safe place? And in the beginning, I think that your mom was really pushing for you to accept this guy.
Yes. Yeah.
We won't mention your mom or his names, but
Yeah.
she was really pushing for you to accept him and act like nothing happened and act like basically that everything's just it, boom, a switch flipped, and this is where we are, and he's your stepdad, and you love him and respect him. And I wanted you to feel safe to feel what you feel. And it was really hard because I was bitter toward him and her. And so from the get go, I tried to be transparent and say, you know what? I don't freaking like him.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't like him.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that so you don't have, I tried to say, I think it's really hard for you to feel and see my feelings and not feel what I feel, but I was trying to be as fair as I could and say, this is where I'm at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like him. I don't want to like him. I'm not happy with her. All of these things, but that doesn't mean that you have to feel, I said in the very beginning, you don't have to feel what I feel.
Yeah, we get to choose how we feel.
You get to choose, I said that. You get to choose how you feel. You don't have to feel how she wants you to feel. And you don't have to feel how I feel. And I'm not telling you I want you to feel that way. If you go over there and he's nice to you and everything's good, which he better be, then I hope that for you that you can have a relationship with him on whatever level is fair there and what you feel in your heart. And I said that from the beginning. And I think that even though I said that, it's probably hard knowing that I felt bitter.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you feel that way?
I feel like it was definitely hard, and I think, I mean, especially from like me and my two younger siblings' perspective, like watching everything happen like right in front of our eyes, it wasn't like we wanted to like him necessarily. Feeling like, in a way, I think
it wasn't like you wanted to like him. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like we're not like we didn't want to like him.
And that was your own feeling?
That was my own feeling, and I think that Maggie and Eddie felt similarly, because I think from our eyes, it felt like he was, in a way, like tearing our family apart, you know what I mean? It felt like he was, in a lot of ways, the root cause of it, you know what I mean? Especially from our perspective at that age and everything. And I think it was really hard to want to be around him and not feel just, like, hurt and, like, it's kind of fake, like, you know what I mean? Not feeling like he should be a part of our family when he's the one who was kind of causing a lot of destruction. And I think that that's how I felt for a while. And I think that Maggie and Eddie felt that way for a little while. And I think that over time, I definitely feel like things have gotten a lot better. Like, it's been 5 years now, and I think that we've been around him.
Yeah.
Not 5 years, right?
4.5.
4.5. Yeah. And I think that, yeah, it's just gotten a lot better. And I think that it's still hard at times, like, to be around him and stuff. But I also think that he's put in some more effort, and I think that that's good. Like, I see him doing things to try to connect with us or talk with us, and I think that's a good thing, because I see a lot of my friends, step parents and stuff, and they didn't get to choose who it was or anything, and we obviously didn't get to choose who my mom's with right now, but I think that I see a lot of my friends and people that are close to me, they'll say that their parents will go and get with somebody new, and then they just want nothing to do with their kids. Like, that person wants nothing to do with that person's kids.
The new
yeah.
person in their parents'
Right.
life. Okay.
Yeah. And I think for a while I felt that way with my mom and her husband, but I think that,
yeah, she's married to him now.
yeah. But I think that over time it's gotten better, and he's realized that he wants to connect with us a little bit more. And I think that he doesn't have all the skills exactly to do that. And so
sure, I
think,
see that.
Yeah. And so I think that makes it hard, but I think that me and my two younger siblings have learned to just take it for what it is more than, and look at what we do have rather than what we don't have. Especially from him, I think.
Wow, that is so big, and that is such a big part of healing, is getting past the bitter point of how things are disappointing or how they aren't what you did want, and learning to see what is good
Yeah.
in things.
And so I think at the very beginning, I think my mom tried to make it like, oh, there was only good and no bad. And I think that was really hard for me and my two younger siblings to.
Well, it wasn't fair and it wasn't true at the time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it didn't feel true at all to any of us. And so I think it was hard to get to the point where we're all at right now. But I see it like just in our interactions when we're at her house with her husband and stuff. And you see like my two younger siblings and me, like we want to have good interactions with him. And I think he wants that too. Like at this point, we're all looking for what good we can have, like together through connection. And I think that's so important. I also think it's important, especially having my dad who is supportive of that. And he's not like, doesn't want that, because I feel like some parents feel still bitter, obviously, from what happened. And I think a lot of parents can feel like, oh, well, like, he's a terrible person. You probably shouldn't connect with him. You know what I mean?
I've tried to encourage if there's a connection to be had there for you to have that from the beginning, even when I was bitter. And then as I grew, I'm curious what your perspective is, how my healing affected that, because now I don't feel bitter and I do just want I even want for your mom and him to have healing on their levels of
Mm-hmm.
wherever they're at, because I see that there definitely is, like, everything is cycles, everything is
Yeah.
perpetuated from what we've experienced in life. And I know that he's had a lot of trauma in
Yeah.
life,
That's,
and
we
I
hear
know that
about
she
that.
has too. And
Mm-hmm.
some of that, it's always been a mystery for me trying to unravel what your mom's trauma was, because there were things I just didn't know
Yeah.
what happened, why. Because I knew that there was trauma there, but I didn't know what it was. There's things she never spoke about. And some of that has kind of come to light for me a little bit more. But
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that seeing my mom in particular going through hard times sometimes, like, I think she struggles a lot with feeling sad sometimes. And I see her often, I think from my perspective, I see her feeling like she's failing if we see that vulnerable or emotional side of her, and that she doesn't want us to see that. And I feel like that's so hard for so many families, and very true, because I think where I'm at with my dad and at his house, it feels like we are most of the time emotionally vulnerable, and I see him be emotionally vulnerable, which makes me feel comfortable to be in that space and feel my feelings. And so I think that at their house, it's just kind of a different situation, because I think that nobody feels 100% safe to feel emotionally vulnerable. And I think that, especially the kids, I see their two kids feel a lot like that. And I've talked several times with my stepsister, and I just hear them say things that I know they wouldn't say to my mom and her husband. And I think that's and sad and interesting at the same time. I don't think she feels necessarily heard in a lot of ways. And I think I know that goes for, I have friends like that in similar situations where they feel like when their parent ends up having a new spouse and they feel like they don't feel safe to share how they're actually feeling.
yeah, that makes sense. So do you feel like you see some of the, that your mom and her husband have had their trauma that basically plays into how they relate to these situations in life? The trauma from childhood, have they talked about some of that?
Yeah, I hear her husband talk about it a lot. It makes us pretty sad to hear about it. Just hear about how he had a pretty rough childhood and nobody was really there for him, from what it sounds like. So he didn't really have a good mentor, as far as I've heard. And I think my mom doesn't share a lot of stuff like that, so I'm not sure as far as it goes for her, but I know that she struggled with some family dynamics when she was younger.
Sure. I know that she did as well, and there's some of it's come to light for me a little bit
Mhm.
recently, but I'm not going to share it. It's not my business to share. I don't really believe, but I just pray for her, and I really hope for her to be able to heal. I hope for him to be able to heal. I don't think that either one of them have. I don't know. I just think that there's good in them, and I just hope for that to come out, and I hope for them to learn how to process those things from childhood and learn how to change their programming and their dynamics. And I see things like when I've dropped you off, that there was one day, I think it was around the time that I started to realize that I was not bitter, maybe. Might be wrong, but I think it was right around then. I remember dropping you off at their house one day, and he was out in the driveway, and I just, I think you drove there, and I
Yeah.
got over to drive, and I watched as you guys walked up to the driveway, and he was out there, and he smiled, and he gave each of you a hug, and the smile to me looked real and warm at whatever level I know things are hard sometimes, but I felt warm inside seeing the
Yeah.
way that he smiled and gave each of you a hug. I felt like there's something in him trying, and I want to see more of that. And I hope for that for him and for you. And, the situation is what it is, and she's with him, and we're never going back, and that's okay, and it's a good thing. So we look for the good. I saw that and I felt hope.
Yeah.
I felt love vibrations and hope inside.
And I feel like what I was saying earlier about like them wanting, I feel like he wants some connection there, and I think that especially that scenario, he was wanting that. You know what I mean? He was willing to connect with us in that kind of a way, and I feel like that's big because it could have gone two ways. Like he could have just completely ignored us and just have us walk in, and I think that doesn't make anybody necessarily feel good. You know?
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of healing has happened. I think there's more to come for everybody. The more things that I learn, the more I heal, and the more things I learn and grow. There's times when you level up, and there's times when you think you're kind of getting there, and then all of a sudden a whole nother. I've told you about my hallway analogy, and
Yeah.
then you get to the end of the hallway and open the door at the end, and you're like, holy shit, there's a whole nother hallway, and you feel almost deflated for a minute. And then you realize, okay, I've been through this before. I just finished a whole hallway, and I can do this. I can do hard things. And but
Yeah.
it's like and then just learning and growing. There's times when I just realize the more I've learned, and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And there's a humility in learning that you realize there's always more to learn.
Yeah. I think for me this year that's helped my healing, especially with my mom and her husband. I think I've tried to have a new perspective and just actually see it for myself that in a lot of ways they're kids too, you know what I mean?
There are kids inside too, yeah.
Yeah, and I see it a lot with their parenting, and so much of me wants to say, oh, that doesn't seem very right, or that doesn't seem very fair. And there's times to stick up and say something, but I think in a lot of ways they're new at this too, you know? Like I think it's hard for everybody too, and I think it's important to give in a way there's a certain amount of grace that you have to have for everybody. While there's still time to uphold boundaries and things that need to be, I think, in place for just everybody's comfort and healing and everything. But I also think that throughout everybody healing, I think that there's also just a space of grace that you have to have for everybody and just understanding where each other are coming from. And so I think that's been a lot of my mom and her husband because we see that a lot when they try to work out issues and stuff. Like not everything's done correctly, and I think it's that's where they tend to struggle, and I think that's where they weren't raised correctly with, which I've kind of heard them talk about a little bit. So it sounds like they haven't had a parent to look up to who's taught them how to handle certain things when it comes up, especially with us kids.
I think they're doing what they think they know how to do, and
Yeah.
and if we focus on the good, then more good comes out, I believe. And I'm proud of where you're at. I'm proud of the healing that you've experienced. On that note of you mentioned kids not getting to pick who who their parent goes with after a divorce and things like that. And I want to touch on that a little bit. I've talked about a lot with you that I promised you kids from the get-go that I would not surprise you with here's your new stepmom and you can pretend to like her kind of thing. And that's where I disagreed with the one person that I I basically said was an expert, and I disagreed with. But I felt like, you've already been through hurt, and there are going to be people who come and go in your life, And so if I'm going through a dating process, I'm teaching you how to look for red and green flags too. And if I start to date somebody, it doesn't have to be that serious yet. And it doesn't have to be like, I don't have to only bring in the perfect scenario for you and show you, oh, this is your new, and pretend it's perfect. If it's not, I'm looking for what will be good for me and for you guys.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for somebody who wants to interact with you as well, with your older step siblings, or your older siblings, your half siblings, and
Yeah.
I chose them from the get go, and I knew when I decided to be with your mom and made that decision that I was choosing them. So that's very important to me. Even though you guys are older than they were then, if I choose to be with somebody new, I'm looking to see how they interact with you. Even
Mhm.
though you guys are closer to being grown, that doesn't matter. There's a family dynamic there.
Yeah.
And I want them to want to connect with you. They won't be your mom. They
Right.
won't replace your mom necessarily, but they can be a mom in a different way, or you can have a
A
friendship
bonus
or
in
a
a way.
relationship with them. And so I'm looking for that. I don't want somebody that wants to isolate me and get me away from you, looking for me to can't wait for you guys to be grown. That's not what I want. I want somebody who will embrace you guys and be like, wow, those are amazing human beings and they'll love you. And I hope that you'll just love this person, have your own relationship with them
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
aside from my relationship with them.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part is looking at it as a positive addition in your life
Mm-hmm.
rather than what sometimes it could be like a takeaway kind of. And I feel like especially being able to even have this open conversation about just your dating life and just everything like that, I think is so like crucial for us kids to understand too and feel like we're a part of it, I think.
How does that feel? Does that feel safer than if I was kind of going out on dates and you had no idea what was going on?
Yeah, I think part of it would be like, yeah, like he's an adult, like he can do that, And that's what I've heard some of my friends say is like, yeah, like she's an adult, like she can go and do that. But I also see like, I think that if you were to do that, I'd feel a little bit worried in some ways. Because you hear about, I don't know, even in like movies and stuff, you'll hear about like evil stepmoms or whatever. And just like, it can be scary at times, you know what I mean? And just feeling like you will end up getting pushed out when they start to come in. And I think that's what ultimately I think a lot of kids fear that aspect of it and losing their parent to that person. And so I think
Sure.
even just being able to hear about it feels inclusive in a lot of ways. And like you already have a little bit of knowledge on what's happening and everything like that. And you're not just being pushed out and this is what's happening.
So, with that being said, uh, and there's nobody that I'm dating or anything right now, but do you have that fear of being pushed out by whoever I might choose to be with in the future?
I feel like you made it very clear to me and all my siblings, like that you put us first in on this and that we feel like when we meet the right person, like you'll know.
It'll fit right. There won't be
Yeah.
any exclusion, it'll be extra inclusion. It'll
Yeah.
be
And I think that also seeing you be laid back and not desperate for a new relationship also puts us at ease a lot, knowing that you don't have to have somebody right now. Even though that would maybe be like nice. But I think that us kids being able to just see that you're relaxed about it, I think makes us feel relaxed about it a lot. And because I think if you felt like rushed to get with somebody new, I think the odds are that it wouldn't be the right dynamic and the right person for our family. And I think that's when the feeling of like losing you to them would start happening.
yeah, and there's a lot of I don't know if stigmas is the word. There's a lot of concepts around dating that it's hard to navigate, and it's hard at my age and my this situation. It's hard to get into dating when everybody's been through a lot of life already, and there's so many expectations. And I want to go into something like where, man, I really enjoy being around this person, but we don't have to commit from the get go. That I see I don't know, I see a lot of things said online and people talking about, oh, you got to be this and this and this. And I'm like, what if I'm not? And what if I'm not? I see a lot of women saying things like, oh, you got to show up and you got to show me you're there. Well, what if I'm not there yet? What if I'm like, I want to get to know you? I don't know that I like you yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm interested and I want to find out more about you. So that's kind of, I think that plays into what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not desperate. I would love to meet somebody that would be important to me and to you guys, but I'm not desperate.
Yeah, and I think part of the whole not being desperate and relaxed part of it, I think that understanding like the right person will come at the right time, you know. And I also think with that being said, that just that you have to understand that it might work and it might not work and just be open to both possibilities of that.
So that's what I was referring to in the last episode about the one, I guess, the one expert saying that you shouldn't introduce anybody new to your kids until you're sure, because their concern is that you traumatize the kids again. I kind of feel different. I'm teaching you to get to know somebody, be relaxed about it, and get to know somebody. You're not committed from day one. And it's okay for people to come and go,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to learn how to look for those red and green flags, and it's okay to learn to process when somebody does go away.
Yeah,
And it
definitely.
might be a little bit disappointing, but it's not the end of the world. It's never probably going to hurt as bad as it did initially when things broke up with me and your mom.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so healthy for kids our age even to see that actually, because I think that if we see examples of that and just being able to watch somebody only be in our life for a certain amount of time, and that's okay. And I think that's so important for our dating aspect, especially coming from like a teenager. I think that understanding that it doesn't have to be a permanent relationship, which I feel like some parents make it out to be like that for their children. Make it out to be like, oh, you don't date anybody until you know it's the one. But it's hard to know it's the one until you date them. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that, all of that playing out in your dating experiences, that you're learning to just be easygoing. You're getting to know somebody. You're getting to know this new kid right now. Sounds like he's pretty cool dude. Like, I think I'm gonna like him when I meet him. And just the experience with being able to say, no, this isn't it with the last one, and that the expectation isn't there that I'm setting everything up. I'm not setting everything up for you where it has to be perfect from the get-go, and then when you break up, there's shame.
yeah, definitely. And I think there was a kid that I talked to for a little bit, a bit before the kid that I'm talking to right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like the talking stage is so important for kids our age. And I think, like you said in the last podcast, just that it's a healthy thing. And I agree. I think that I was talking to this one kid at one point. I felt like he was so clingy and like he just needed to have that security and knowing that he's with somebody. And it makes me think that that comes from his parents too, you know? And so I feel like it's good to be able to say, yeah, I'm not wanting to take this further. I think that we should stop this right here. And I think that's such an important thing for kids to be able to do in a talking stage, especially. And it's an important thing to learn to do now rather than struggle with it when you're an adult and get stuck in a situation that you don't really want to be in.
Yeah, and the things you told me about that kid, I've told you, I don't think that he's a bad person.
No, I don't either.
Actually, I resonated with a lot of what you told me about him. That it just sounds very familiar with my codependent programming from childhood. I feel like I read him and feel like he's very codependent. And what I told you is that you did good seeing through that and being able to stop when you did and realize, yeah, that's not what I want. It would be, it's not that he's a bad person in any
No,
way. I
definitely
hope
not.
that he finds healing from that and learns how to be secure in himself and get
Right.
in touch with himself and find that healing. But I think that it would have been a very hard thing to be in a relationship with someone like that. So I
Yeah,
see where I
definitely.
was when
Yeah.
it wasn't that long ago that
Right.
I was basically him.
Yeah. And I feel like being somebody like in that kid's shoes specifically, I feel like for him it's going to be hard someday to say no or say like I don't want this relationship anymore because it sounds like cuz he would tell me about his parents sometimes and it sounds like that comes from his parents too and his parents kind of made it sound like either you find the one and you like date them or you don't date anybody. And that just feels like such a unhealthy dynamic in a lot of ways because I think we're all human and it's going to be hard to find the right one ultimately for you. And there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, I think. But I think it's just important to be able to be with different people at certain times, especially like for where I'm at. I feel like it's a good thing for me right now to understand what I do and don't like so that later on in life it doesn't have to be a super painful thing.
Yeah. I think you're doing really well, and I'm really impressed with your ability to just what you've learned about seeing those red flags and saying no, that doesn't work, and even learning how to look for the things that you do like and what you do want. I'm really impressed. I feel like you're doing better than I am, and you you'll do well.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like it helps just having a parent who's relaxed about that too, like relax with their own dating life and with their kids' dating life. And obviously, there's going to be concerns from a parent's point of view, but there's also just I think that between me and my dad, I think we have a state of trust between each other too.
Sure, there's the things that every parent worries about,
Yeah.
and some of it I try to be careful how much of it comes from prior belief systems and religious beliefs, but I'm not in control. I can't babysit you every minute, and you're going to make choices. You're going to make your own choices. So, what I've tried to do is encourage you to just be very in tune with your heart. Do you feel good about the things you're doing, or do you feel bad? How far do you want to progress? I think you're in a safe place right now where you just want to get to know this kid that you're talking to right now, and you don't want to get physical and things
Mm-mm.
like that. You've told me that, and that's good. What I've tried to encourage is that I'm not in control of those decisions for you. Um, I don't want to be in control, because if I'm in control, then there'll be a lot more pressure, expectations. I want you to be in your own heart space, and what I've told you is I just don't want you to do anything that you'll feel ashamed of
Yeah.
or regret. So always be aware of that yourself.
Yeah. I feel like that's a really big thing that parents don't talk to their kids about. Because I know I have a lot of friends and their parents will just tell them, like, oh, yeah, like, you just don't do that because that's wrong. Or you don't do this because we don't approve of that. And I think that there's a lot more than just that, like you were saying, just the feeling of regret or shame. And I think that's so big that a lot of kids don't necessarily consider when making a decision like that. And so I think having that said from a parent's point of view and not like an authoritative or like scary kind of conversation, I think, but more of just a kind of supportive and trust kind of dynamic, I think changes that a lot for a kid to feel comfortable to make the right decision versus feeling scared to make the wrong decision.
Yep. And there have been situations where, I don't know, real subtle, nothing way big, but there's been things that came up where I wasn't in control. I wasn't there with you. I couldn't hold your hand. I wasn't
Yeah.
babysitting you. And you made very good decisions, and you handled the situation, and I wasn't there to rescue you, kind of thing. And you made great decisions. And I was like, wow, you're amazing, and you're doing what you feel in your heart. Most important thing to me is that I'm teaching you or encouraging you to learn to do what I didn't learn until my late 40s, is to start being in touch with my heart. What do I really want? And go with my heart and my feelings, what I feel in my heart, to be able to honor that. And I feel like You do that better than I do.
I think that I think that you not building fear in us too is such a big dynamic of us feeling comfortable to make our own decisions too, and not go based off of what we feel scared because of our parent or anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very proud of you. I think you're an amazing young lady. You're going to go further with all the spirituality and healing and growth than me. It's a stepping stone. I talked about it before about ascending cycles. I think it was maybe my third episode. And I feel like we're creating that here. And you're going to ascend further than I will. And then you'll be able to mentor and coach your kids to go further than you. And we're going to break the cycles and we're going to help the world. We're going to heal the world.
Yeah, I agree.
You're amazing. I love you, Riley.
I love you too.
You are my sweetie pie.
You're my daddy pie.